When life takes everything away, it often gives us something unexpected in return, a reason to keep going. James Miller had always believed that life rewarded hard work and careful planning. He built his life like an architect designs a masterpiece, precisely, with no room for error. His family was the heart of his world. Sarah, his wife, was the love of his life. His partner in every sense of the word. She had a way of making even the smallest moments feel magical, with her infectious laughter and the way she always found beauty in the mundane. And then there was Lily, their daughter, whose imagination knew no bounds. She would sit on the floor of James's home office with crayons scattered around her, drawing castles, bridges, and buildings she dreamed of one day creating. "Daddy," she would say, "I'll help you build these one day." For James, life felt perfect. His career was thriving, his home was filled with love. And he often thought, "I've built the life I always wanted." But as James would soon discover, life doesn't always follow the plans we make. Chapter 1. A sudden shift. It was a crisp autumn evening. James was wrapping up a major presentation at work, his heart light with excitement about getting home. Sarah had texted earlier, "Lily and I are planning a surprise for dinner. Don't be late." James smiled as he imagined the two of them in the kitchen, likely making a mess as they prepared something special. But before he could leave the office, his phone rang. "Mr. Miller?" The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Yes, this is James. This is St. Mary's Hospital. There's been an accident involving your wife and daughter. We need you to come immediately." The words didn't register at first. What do you mean? Are they okay?" The voice didn't waver. "Please come to the hospital. The doctors will explain everything." James's drive to the hospital was a blur of panic and dread. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. When he arrived, a doctor met him in the waiting room. "Mr. Miller," the doctor began, "your wife sustained severe injuries in the accident. We did everything we could, but she didn't survive. I'm so sorry." James's world shattered. "Your daughter, Lily, is stable but in critical condition. She's in surgery now." The doctor's words barely penetrated James's mind. He felt like he was falling, spiraling into a darkness he couldn't escape. Chapter 2. The depths of grief. The days that followed Sarah's death were an endless fog. James moved through them mechanically, arranging the funeral, sitting by Lily's hospital bed, and answering the quiet condolences of friends and family. The house, once filled with laughter, now felt unbearably silent. James would walk into the kitchen and half expect to see Sarah there, humming a tune as she cooked. Her absence was everywhere, a constant ache that refused to fade. Lily eventually came home from the hospital, but she was no longer the vibrant, curious child James had known. She barely spoke, clinging to one of Sarah's scarves as though it were the only thing tethering her to her mother. James tried to be strong for Lily, but inside, he was breaking. He buried himself in work, staying late at the office to avoid coming home to the painful reminders of what they had lost. But grief is not something you can outrun. It follows you, no matter how fast or far you go. Chapter 3. A glimmer of hope. One evening, James came home late to find Lily asleep on the couch. She had drawn a picture of their family, James, Sarah, and herself. In the picture, Sarah was depicted as an angel with wings and a glowing halo. Beneath the drawing, Lily had written, "Mummy says everything will be okay." James stared at the picture, his throat tightening. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to cry, deep, unrelenting sobs that seemed to pour out all the pain he had been holding inside. In that moment, James realized he couldn't keep running from his grief. He had to face it, for himself and for Lily. Chapter 4. The healing journey. The next day, James called a therapist. It was one of the hardest decisions he had ever made, but he knew he couldn't navigate this alone. In therapy, he began to unpack the guilt and anger that had consumed him since Sarah's death. The therapist encouraged James to focus on the present, on the love he still had for Lily, on the memories of Sarah that could never be taken away, and on the life they could still build together. At the therapist's suggestion, James joined a support group for grieving families. At first, he was reluctant, unsure of what to say or how to share his pain with strangers. But as he listened to others tell their stories, he began to feel less alone. One evening, a woman in the group said something that stuck with James. "Grief is like a storm, it can tear you apart. But it also clears the way for new growth." James didn't fully understand those words at the time, but they planted a seed of hope in his heart. Chapter 5. Turning pain into purpose. Inspired by the support group, James decided to use his skills as an architect to help others. He began designing memorial gardens, beautiful, serene spaces where families could reflect, heal, and honor their loved ones. One of his projects was a garden dedicated to Sarah. It was filled with her favorite flowers, winding paths, and benches where people could sit and find peace. Through this work, James found a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in months. He realized that while he couldn't change the past, he could create something meaningful in the present. Lily, too, began to heal. She started talking about her mother more, sharing memories and stories that made James smile. Slowly but surely, their home began to feel warm again. Chapter 6. A new beginning. Years later, James stood at the opening of a community center he had designed, a space for grieving families to find support, connection, and hope. Holding Lily's hand, now a bright and confident young girl, James spoke to the crowd. "There was a time when I thought my life was over," he said. "But I've learned that even the deepest pain can lead to something beautiful. My wife's loss taught me to love more deeply, to live with gratitude, and to help others find their way." The audience erupted in applause, and James felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. James's story is a reminder that life doesn't always make sense. Tragedy strikes and the pain feels unbearable. But even in our darkest moments, there is a reason, a lesson, a purpose, or a path to something greater. To everyone listening, when life feels unbearable, hold on. The storm will pass, and when it does, it will leave behind something you never expected, a reason to keep going.